Hi Afia, can you hear me? And is this screen visible? All right. So I guess we can wait for a couple of more minutes to see in case anyone is joining, and we can proceed. How has everything been going for you with the course? Okay, all good. Any difficulties, tricky topics so far? No, all concepts are clear. Last weeks are easier. All right, that's good. Do you have any favorite topic till date that you have liked so far in the course? Is there anything in particular that you liked? Population ecology. Okay, that's interesting. That's nice. So yeah, we are in week 10 now. Another 2 weeks to go. Mostly like a week, and then the revision sessions. Have you signed up for the exam? Yeah. Okay. Cool. What is the date for the exam? 28th, right? Something like that. Yeah. All right. All right. We have. Oops. Aparna joined and left. So yesterday's session didn't happen because I think it's happening today again parallelly. Not sure. Okay, yesterday's got postponed. Okay. Alright. Okay, anyway, so Afia looks like it's gonna be you and me today. So let's discuss. Let me just introduce myself. I'm Chiti, your course TAs, one of your course TAs for this course on wildlife ecology. We are now in week 10, reaching the end, and let's bring up our first question, which is what are LIDs? Are they low impact disturbances? Are they large impact disturbances? Are they large and infrequent disturbances, or are they large illegal disturbances? What does LID stand for? C. All right. So, okay, that's correct. They are large infrequent disturbances. Let's move to the next question. So there is this hypothesis explained out here. What exactly is this diagram trying to tell us? We have levels of disturbance on the x-axis and species diversity on the y-axis. What hypothesis is actually shown out here? Any idea? Don't know the name. Okay, do you know any description of this? What it could possibly be? The loss disturbance altered the diversity, loss resilience. Okay. Okay, so let's go in stage 1. What's happening in stage 1? You have no disturbance and some level of species diversity, right? But as we move along the x-axis, what is happening? Disturbance increases, correct? So now when we look at stage 2 and stage 3, what exactly is happening? What is the difference between stage 2 and stage 3? Disturbances is large and frequent. Okay, sure. So the level of disturbance is going on increasing. But what's happening to the species diversity in stage 2 and stage 3? Okay, and what about in 2? What's happening in 2? Two most correct, right? So this particular hypothesis is known as the intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Does that strike a bell? Yeah. So what happens in the intermediate disturbance hypothesis? You need some amount of disturbance, and moderate amount of disturbance is enough to increase some level of species diversity. So can you give me an example of intermediate disturbance hypothesis? Okay, sure. And any examples of any events? Increase fitness, okay, perhaps to some extent, but it's really not a very long event, right? It's really not that long. So basically what is happening, we are looking at how we are probably going to intermediate disturbance hypothesis basically tracks your disturbances from rare to frequent, right? And if the disturbance level is at the mid level, not too rare, not too frequent, you have the highest species diversity, and this is characterized by the occurrence of certain events such as, like for example, fires, right? Fires are a great example of occurrences of fires sporadically increases species diversity because some chunk of land is burnt down, and then that fire actually stimulates the regeneration of the next factor, right? So the next factor is actually regeneration of new plants is generated with the new level of disturbance, right? Okay, so tell me, when does secondary succession happens? What is secondary succession? Correct. So for secondary succession to happen, your disturbance needs to be really large. So that is kind of like some volcanic eruption or something, right? Because everything is lost. But in the case of intermediate level of disturbance, I don't think you can have like some, volcanic eruptions, because volcanic eruptions are not very common, right? They happen like once in a while, but not very common. But like for example, fires keep on happening. you are right about the concept of secondary succession, but in the intermediate disturbance hypothesis, this something like a forest fire would fit better. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. Alright, so now we are talking about the large and infrequent disturbances, right? And you have 3 graphs here looking at large and infrequent disturbances, and the triangles on the x-axis represent the events of these large infrequent disturbances. And could you tell me how is that reflected in the community state? So what is actually happening in figure 1? Let's just discuss figure 1. What's happening in figure 1? Disturbance 1 and then recovery, right? So in the first case, you are having a disturbance, an immediate disturbance, rare and infrequent disturbance at one time point, and your community state has completely been altered. Like we are going from altered to normal, so completely altered, and then you have a recovery period. It takes a bit of a while, but then finally it recovers to its normal state a little down the line. What is happening in figure 2? Disturbance recovery starts again and again. Disturbance alteration persists permanently. Okay, so what's actually happening in figure 2 is there is a disturbance that is happening. Your community structure is completely lost, and then what's happening? You are recovering till a point when there is another disturbance, right? So your other disturbance is coming into play, and when the second disturbance comes, that's it. Your community state is completely altered and then it doesn't recover. So this shows that more the number of these rare and infrequent, large and infrequent disturbances, it has a lasting change on the community, right? And now what about the third figure? What does that tell us? Okay, already altered community, and then yeah, so you have a disturbance that occurs, and when the disturbance occurs, the community is completely altered, and then there is no chance of, as you mentioned, there is no chance of any recovery, right? So this makes sense, right? So your community, the degree to which your community is already in a state of alteration and the time at which your disturbance occurs, this is only about large and infrequent disturbances, determines how across time your community will recover or continue to remain in its altered state, right? Right, let's go to the next question. So Do you have any idea of any oil spill that occurred in the Gulf of Mexico? It's actually a very famous oil spill. Could you give me the name? Any idea what this oil spill, the name of this oil spill? Okay. Right. So, are you familiar with the name of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill? Yes. Right. So, what actually happened? Any idea what happened? How did this oil spill happen? This happened in the which area? Gulf of, any idea? Mexico, right? Yeah. So what happened in the Gulf of Mexico? How did this big, huge oil spill as shown in this diagram, how did that happen? Was it a ship container? Was it something else? Drilling, right? So there was an explosion that happened, right? And it happened in the oil rig itself, right? So in April 2010, an explosion happened on this oil rig, and the rig started to sink, causing the discharge of oil into this Gulf of Mexico, right? Any idea who the which oil company was this? Transocean. Yeah, I think it is Transocean, and it was leased by BP, right? And what were the effects of this explosion? It traveled huge areas, right? Across the ocean, throughout the ocean, right? And any idea what was used for the cleanups? What were the effects? No. So they tried various measures for cleaning it up. They were trying to siphon off the oil. They were burning the oil. They were then manually removing the oil. So there were various different ways in which they were trying to, but the effects and aftermath was very, very high. and a large amount of wildlife ended up succumbing to this, right? So this was like a huge action. Yes, fishery and marine life was greatly impacted. That's correct. Alright, so what are hydrocarbons derived directly from minerals called? Are they biogenic, are they pleogenic, pyrogenic, or petrogenic? Petrogenic. Okay, so what are biogenic hydrocarbons? Yeah, what are they? What are biogenic hydrocarbons? Derived from biological reactions. Okay, what about pleogenic hydrocarbons? Well, that doesn't exist. What are pyrogenic hydrocarbons? Derived from mineral oil. Oh, you are correct about the petrogenic hydrocarbon. They are derived directly from mineral oil. But what about pyrogenic hydrocarbons? What is the difference between petrogenic and pyrogenic? No, both are from rock only. I mean from minerals, but pyrogenic are actually formed from the incomplete burning of minerals. Yeah. So that is the difference between pyrogenic and petrogenic hydrocarbons. All right, let's move on. So hydrocarbons are divided into 5 groups based on their specific gravity. Which group is susceptible to spread the most and cover the largest area, and which group is likely to cause the most ecological damage, and why? Okay. So, okay, can you describe a little bit what are the hydrocarbons actually? With the group 1 to 2, which has a higher specific gravity? Right. So basically, group 1 hydrocarbons are heavy or light? Light, right? So these hydrocarbons end up floating at the, you are correct with your answers. Group 1 is actually very light and it floats, right? so it can be floating on the surface of the water. And affect how does that actually affect marine life? Yeah, it blocks a lot of light and it doesn't allow oxygen to penetrate. And what else? Which which group is susceptible to most degradation? Hi Amrita, we were just discussing some question. Feel free to pitch in. One. Okay. So, why would one be more susceptible to degradation? Yeah, so basically, I think we have read also that UV can degrade hydrocarbons because it can break it down. There are also other microorganisms that can break down hydrocarbons. So when we spread any either organic or inorganic, yeah, oxidation, photonic reactions, etc., you're absolutely right. So anything we put to mitigate oil spills is going to remain floating on the water, and that is going to be easily degraded, right? So the highest degradation can be done for hydrocarbons with a low specific gravity that remain floating on the top. But as we rate group 1 low specific gravity, but if we go down the groups to like group 5 for example, they are responsible for higher degree of what? Do they last longer or do they not last longer? Which group of hydrocarbon will last longer in the ocean? Five. Yeah, that's correct. So group 5 hydrocarbons have a higher persistence because they will settle down to the bottom of the ocean, and they are also concentrated and localized over over a small area. So the effect that it's going to have is going to be greater in that smaller area rather than these group 1 hydrocarbons that are diffused and dispersed over a very large area. So the overall concentration per volume of water is going to be very less, right? Right. is that? Uh-oh, something has happened to this slide. Okay, so can someone describe to me what are these oil-eating microbes? What has happened to the animation out here? Let me just rectify this. Alright, yeah, sorry about that. So what is actually, how do actually oil eating microbes help in your degradation of hydrocarbons? So this is again talking about which oil spill? That happened in the Gulf of Mexico. Right, your Deepwater Horizon oil spill. And what's actually happening here? So they use naturally occurring microbes in the ocean to feed on these hydrocarbons, right? And what happens actually, so as we all know and as we all have read, oil contains hydrocarbons which are made up of various amounts of carbon and hydrogen. Oxygen is needed for a chemical reaction but can be much less in the sparse ocean and also at greater depths. That is a problem. So what they do is these microbes break apart the hydrocarbons and combine them with oxygen to create water and carbon dioxide, thus being able to degrade them. So adding of fertilizer helps in the propagation of these microorganisms as it acts as a substrate for food, and the more the number of microbes are able to multiply, the faster your oil spill or hydrocarbons are likely to degrade, right? But if you increase too much fertilizer, that can also result in the growth of algae, which can in turn lead to algal blooms, right? And what is the factor, what is the term that we have learned about algal blooms covering the entire water surface? What does it cause? Eutrophication, right? Yeah, so that's right. So majority of the oil or the hydrocarbons can be consumed, but the majority of them cannot be consumed, and they still remain in the environment. So here there is this marine bacterium known as alkani borax that feeds on oil, and when this alkani borax is put inside the water, it forms a complete film around the oil droplet. As you can see, it's completely surrounded it. This is basically a thing done in nanometers, 1000 nanometers scale, and it's probably just going to munch down that oil droplet, right? So this is what happens in this case. Okay, so plastic is the most prevalent type of marine debris found in our ocean and Great Lakes. Plastic debris can come in all shapes and sizes, but those that are less than 5 mm in length are called what? Which of these following terms is most appropriate? Okay, one guess. B, okay. Oh, there was someone else, I thought. Right. Yeah, you're right. B is the correct answer. They are called microplastics. Okay. Dash are relatively non-volatile organic substances, mainly they are liquids. When incorporated into a plastic or elastomer, they help the polymer's flexibility, extensibility and processability. It can increase the flow and thermoplasticity of a polymer by decreasing the viscosity of the polymer belt at the glass transition temperature Tg and the melting temperature, and the elastic modulus of the finished product without altering the fundamental chemical character of the plasticized material. So what is this basic component called? What is this called? An additive, a toxin, a plasticizer or an emulsifier? Okay. Yeah, so it's a plasticizer, right? Basically, a plasticizer increases the pliability of any of the plastic components. Okay, so the likelihood that an organism will be exposed to a disturbance factor is called sensitivity, exposure, toxicity, or vulnerability. Okay. Okay. So can you tell me what does sensitivity mean? You're correct. Both of you are right.
Sensitivity would be in terms of how reactive a particular organism is to a condition, whether it is too sensitive to high temperatures or something like that.
Right. Sure. And basically, in sensitivity, you're already exposed to the oil, right? Or whatever the disturbance factor is. What about toxicity?
Exposure to that particular disturbance factor, maybe it is lethal to the organism. Is that how we define toxicity?
Yeah, so basically, we are trying to see what are the adverse impacts that a particular component can have on any living organisms. And yeah, you're right in that explanation as well. What about exposure? It's just, yeah, you can explain it in your own words. There's no technical definition for this. Exposure to harmful. It's just when the harmful thing is in contact with anything, right? Alright, let's move on to the next question. So there are two scenarios getting depicted out here. What exactly does it explain? Any idea? These are two terms, quite important terms that you probably would have come across at some point of time. Yeah. Bioaccumulation and biomagnification, right? So what's really happening in both these cases? What is the difference? Toxic material increases in higher trophic level. Okay, and what's happening in the first case? What's happening in bioaccumulation? We don't move along the trophic level, right? In bioaccumulation, it's the same organism that keeps, yeah, correct. So the organism keeps accumulating these toxins, but it really doesn't die or it's not eaten. So bioaccumulation can lead to also biomagnification, because ultimately you will see the highest amount of any particular contaminant at the highest quantity at the highest trophic level. So here you have a bunch of shrimp or crustaceans that are eaten by some fish, and the fish are eaten by some seals or walruses, and the seals or walruses are predated by polar bears at the biomagnification level. Alright, so this is just an explanation of whatever we just talked about. So basically, when pollutants build up in a single organism's body over time, it is considered as bioaccumulation. And out here we look at mercury poisoning, right? Not mercury poisoning, mercury accumulation, right? So basically there's a lot of mercury in the water due to the discharge of industrial processes, and fish and shellfish, since they usually say bottom crawlers on the floor of the marine ecosystem, ingest in a lot of mercury, and they only absorb small amounts of it at a time, but over a long period of time and continuing to remain in that environment, they tend to accumulate larger concentrations of mercury, which leads to accumulation, right? And then the example with biomagnification is given in the form of PCBs, which are basically polychlorinated biphenyls, and they also enter the ocean via industrial waste and are absorbed by these microscopic phytoplankton. These phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton, and zooplankton eat large quantities of phytoplankton. Then you have small fish that feed on these zooplankton that also are accumulating a larger degree of these PCBs in their system. And then finally, when you have these top predators like out here these orca whales that consume fishes, they end up having the highest degree of toxins. So any idea of biomagnification process that is seen in India and is a famous example? Do you all remember? DDT and in which organism? Birds, right? Remember, any idea which bird? It's a large bird. No, okay. So basically, they are vultures, right? So vultures are the most affected by our DDT, and vultures had a DDT had a cascading effect on vultures because DDT basically caused the thinning of the shells of vultures, right? So when vultures would lay eggs, their shells would be so thin that the eggs would crack and there would be no chicks. So this caused a huge decline in the vulture population, and DDT is basically a common not DDT, sorry, it's diclofenac. Diclofenac is a popular antibiotic that is used in, well, DDT is a pesticide that also has biomagnification effects, but I was talking about actually diclofenac, which is basically an antibiotic or a painkiller that was usually administered to cattle, etc., and in farms. And when these cattle, etc., passed away, then their carcasses used to lie out there in the open, and these were predated upon by these scavengers, which ultimately ingested a lot of diclofenac, which resulted in this bioaccumulation process. But yes, DDT also does affect, because DDT is consumed by caterpillars that feed silent spring book. Yeah, so you are correct. So DDT sprayed on plants is consumed by caterpillars. Caterpillars are consumed by your primary consumers, followed by secondary consumers, followed by tertiary consumers. With, yeah, for example, if the birds are the top predators, like for example eagles or owls, etc., they would have the highest level of pesticide in them. So yeah, you're correct, Afia. All right, let's move on. Oops. Okay, so any idea what is marine snow? Marine snow. Yes, biomass for the upper regions fall into the lower regions, right? And this is basically classified as organic matter. But what is the harm in this? What is the problem now? So actually marine snow is very, very important because this acts as a source of food for all the bottom dwellers, right? So it is very important. It's a very important factor. But now, what is the problem with our pollutants in the ocean? What attaches to marine snow? Microplastics, right? So microplastics basically have some affinity to marine snow, and along with the marine snow and this organic debris, you also have microplastics that are reaching the bottom of the ocean. Now you have plastics that are ingested at all levels across all trophic levels also of the ecosystem, but you would never think how marine plastics can get to the bottom of the ocean. But here is an example of how that happens, right? And that just shows how vulnerable our ecosystem is to the pollution that we are creating, right? Alright, so here we have a figure, and what actually is denoted in this figure? Any idea? Feces is your poop or waste, solid waste excreted, anything excreted by the body. Eco corona, I don't know what is eco. I'm just looking it up. Nanomaterials taken up from the environment carry a complex ecocorona consisting of dissolved organic matter. Ecocorona is assumed to influence the interaction between nanomaterials and endogenous biomolecules, consequently affecting the formation of biological corona and the biological fate of your nanomaterials. It seems like a kind of environment. Definition, I'm just looking up. It's a layer of biomolecules or organic substances pulled from the environment onto the nanomaterial surface. So your nanomaterial is whatever nanoplastics etc. that you have, and a layer of biomolecules or these organic substances that get attracted to this nanomolecule surface forms the ecocorona. Yeah. Alright, so what does this diagram denote? What do you think it is? What are the white circles drawn here? Okay, let me give you a hint. Oh yeah, okay, so Afia has already mentioned it. Crocodile, turtles, etc. Yeah. So, do you want to explain what is happening in pattern 1 and pattern 2? Yeah, that's correct. As temperature increases, more the number of females, that is correct. And basically, extremely high or low temperatures become, in pattern 2, you have, what do you have? In right. Right. So yeah, so exactly what you are saying is the correct factor. So this is basically, what is this? Yeah, so this temperature dependent sex determination is found in reptiles mostly, and certain organisms follow the first pattern and certain organisms follow the second pattern. So basically, what do crocodiles follow? Any idea? Or alligators or anything? Two. Okay, and turtles follow? One. Yeah, it's correct. Okay, so which of the following is not a greenhouse gas? Water vapor, methane, nitrous oxide, nitrogen. Okay. So Amrita and Shantanu say water vapor is a greenhouse gas. Afia, what about you? D. Yeah. So Afia, you're right. It's actually nitrogen that is not a greenhouse gas. The rest of them, including water vapor, are greenhouse gases. So water vapor, methane, and nitrous oxide are greenhouse gases, while nitrogen is not a greenhouse gas. Alright, so we are reached almost the end of this. This is like an open discussion. So, what do you think are the key factors controlling climate change? human population, energy consumption, landfill by concrete. I'm not really sure of what you mean by that. Deforestation, yes. What else? Greenhouse gases, temperature increases, ice cover decreases. Sure, yeah. What else? Sustainable development controls climate change. Okay, sure. Shantanu, would you like to give some examples as to how we can be more sustainable? Anybody would like to answer how uh, sustainable, how we can be more sustainable? No? No ideas? Think about what changes you can make at what everyone can make at their level. What are the first steps you can do? What can you reduce? What can you avoid? We've all mentioned terms that are purely anthropogenic, that are causing climate change, right? Yeah. Yeah, so Shantanu, yeah, there's probably not just one particular region in the world. There's probably many different regions in the world that are sinking, and you know, uh, getting even if you take the most common example, are these low-lying areas near the coastal areas or any island systems. They are increasingly disappearing because of our rise in sea level. So most of the sea level water is held in these polar ice caps. Because of the warming of the environment, these polar ice caps are melting and the water levels are rising, thus resulting in a lot of crucial low-lying areas getting submerged, right? And your anthropogenic effects are also leading to a large amount of habitat degradation, etc., like you have mentioned. uh, yeah, affairs is in Sundarbans, there will, yeah, so it's a mangrove low-lying area. Venice, which is also very close and connected with a lot of waterways, is going to be underwater. Yes, Amrita, we should start using reusable goods and refusing plastics. Whatever plastics we have, we should also reuse. Also, we didn't cover this aspect, but plastic recycling is a huge is a huge process, right? As we know, our plastics come in various degrees. You'll see these PET number, and that basically the plastic needs to be sorted according to the PET numbers, and then only it can be recycled. And when we talk about recycling, it just doesn't happen at the drop of a hat. There are a lot of people involved who manually segregate these plastics, and then only it is recycled. How is plastic recycling done? There are various different ways of doing it. Most often, after sorting, it is melted and then it is remolded, and with this remolded plastics you can manufacture different kinds of things, right? Nowadays you have things like jeans and shoes that have components of plastics that are incorporated into it. I'm not sure how far that holds true, but if they are really using recycled products, it is actually a great way of reducing the amount of plastic in the environment. Crisis of rains in all India, which affects agriculture due to climate change. Yeah, this is a huge problem, right? India is a primarily agrarian country, and because of these fluctuations in rainfall and temperature, this is leading to a huge loss in crops in various regions at various points of time in the year, right? So sometimes we feel it is too hot when it's not supposed to be that hot, too cold when it's not supposed to be that cold, right? So you have these extremities in temperature and rainfall that alter the growth of our crops in our country itself. So yeah, that's a good example. So I think we can wrap up the class with this. Clothes from pineapple fiber. Okay, that is new. I haven't heard of this, but something that I heard of about recycling is that they are collecting elephant dung, and elephant dung has a large amount of fiber, right? Because elephants are herbivores and their dung consists of a large amount of cellulose in their poop, and this elephant dung is being used to create paper. So they actually sell paper made up of elephant dung. Organic agriculture rather than pesticides and fertilizer, which also participating in climate change. More than climate change is probably participating in these anthropogenic effects on crops. But Shantanu, tell me why, or anyone else also, tell me why we don't really use organic farming and organic methods of fertilizing the land. So these are the pros. We know it is all healthy, but what are the cons? Correct, right? We have such a large population. If we do organic farming, we are not going to be able to produce that much of crop to feed everyone, right? And because there is such a huge demand, basic economics, to meet such a large demand, as we studied in the previous classes, we have the advent of technology, and technology is being able to help us farm larger areas more efficiently, put fertilizers, pesticides, all these artificial components to increase crop yield. Crop yield is increased to meet the demands of the current population rate. If we go to organic farming, what is one of the key factors of organic farming? Apart from it being organic and very eco-friendly. Okay, take an example. You're going to a supermarket, you're looking at what else? Normal pulses or lentils, normal moong dal versus organic moong dal. What is the difference? Dal, everyone knows. Lentils. If you pick up a packet of your normal packets dal versus organic packets dal that is branded as organic, what is the difference? Nobody? Nobody has shopped? Nobody has gone to a grocery store? Not so bright. Okay, forget. Yeah, actually, you are right. They are not polished. So, the polished ones are the ones that are not organic. What else? What is the difference? Apart from the physical properties.
No chemical pesticides were used.
Correct. No chemical pesticides are used in your organic farming. That's why it is being sold as organic farming. What else? More expensive, right? You're correct. They are much more expensive than your non-organic products. Because why are they more expensive? Because they are produced in much lesser quantities, right? Because they have to be grown in such a controlled environment and it involves a lot of intensive labor, the prices shoot up, right? And it takes time for it to grow properly, of course, and everything needs to be monitored and controlled. So quantity versus quality, your quality of your organic food will be very high quality, but the quantity will be low. That's why the prices will be very high, whereas your non-organic food will be much cheaper because it's produced, it can be mass produced, right? So what would be the sweet spot out here? Okay, so what will be a way to optimize the situation right now? Currently, we are in a situation where we have non-organic cheap food versus organic expensive food. What would be an optimal situation right now, or what should we do, or what not we as a person, what should be done? Right, so we have to make organic products more affordable and to increase the yield. So there have to be some ways in which we are able to increase production, bring down costs, and basically supply them to the entire market, right? Personally, I feel whatever organic stuff we do see, we don't know what is the gradient of organic also, right? Unless we are growing our own vegetables, for example, we don't know really what is organic or not organic. Yes, there are certifications, and yes, we must try and increase yield in organic of organic products by somehow trying to bring down costs in some direction. I'm not really sure how this is to be done, but I'm sure all of you can think of ways and suggest, and probably yeah, this might come into existence a couple of years down the line. Sometimes we think that a lot of things are very improbable at this stage, but few years down the line you see it happening everywhere and something being really common. So you never know how technology and infrastructure, etc., and science, just the fast pace at which science is moving, we would be able to come up with something like this. So yeah, thanks all of you for joining in. And do you have any doubts? Large mammals have a great role in climate change control. Is this written in the text, or you're asking? Oh, you're not asking. It's not written in the text. Okay, where is this coming from, Afia? Where are you getting this question from? Can I ask? Like, what made you think of this thing? Climate change and large mammals. So large mammals are definitely important components of the ecosystem since they regulate a large amount of dynamics in the ecosystem, right? For example, elephants can walk great distances, consume great amounts of grass, result in high turnover of new vegetation, etc. As to how they contribute towards climate change is I don't know, but they are definitely keystone species, and the loss of these keystone species can result in a downstream effect on the environment, right? So if you don't have any of these apex predators, example, you will have large amount of herbivores. Large amount of herbivores are going to result in the loss of a large amount of vegetation, and it's a downstream effect. As to direct climate change, I'm not really sure how that links, but in terms of like ecosystem imbalance, yes, that is definitely a possibility. Does that make sense? Loss of that river, yeah, so the river will not get lost, the river will still be there, but the water won't be held, right? So what are river beavers do? They build dams on rivers, and these dams result in the water being held back, and different organisms colonize this slow held back water, right? But if beavers were not there, you would probably just be having a fast flowing river not held back. So they generate new ecosystems, but absence of them leads to, well, if it's already an existing ecosystem where you're introducing beavers, then it's a different point altogether. But if beavers were originally a part of the ecosystem and they had been removed, yes, then that is going to cause a lot of habitat loss. But direct desertification, I'm not really sure. It's probably a long term effect. Yeah, does that make sense? What are larger carbon reserves than elephants? There are two huge carbon reserves in our environment. What are they? And elephants are not carbon banks. Elephants breathe out carbon dioxide. Yeah, exactly. So you said trees. That is absolutely correct. So trees and oceans are huge carbon sinks, right? But elephants are not bred, so they are not increasing in numbers, and they are K-selected species. But cows are bred, right, Shantanu? Cows are bred due to farming and poultry farming. We covered this in the earlier lectures itself, and they result in accumulation of unnecessary amounts of methane in the atmosphere, right? Also, Shantanu mentioned something earlier. Elephants, no, reduce the usage of things which participating in the depletion of ozone layer. Yeah, like aerosols, CFCs, etc. Yeah, you're correct. Okay, Afia, you wanted to understand how to relate elephants in this case. So, I'm not really sure what you are thinking at present. So, elephants are keystone species that the loss of these keystone species can result in the ecosystems being modified, right? But elephants are not generating a lot of methane in the atmosphere. I'm not really sure. Yeah, their body consists of matter, so they contribute to a large amount of biomass in the environment. So loss of elephants definitely is a loss of biomass, but a huger loss of biomass is in trees, right? your entire vegetation put together is way more percent of biomass than your animals put together, right? Because there are a lot more of animals than plants. So loss of trees, which are also carbon sinks, can result in alteration of climate because your carbon sinks are going away and you will have no oxygen in the atmosphere, right? But elephants are keystone species that play an important role in the ecosystem, and downstream effects, yes, will be large, but not as large as removing the entire habitat of the elephant, right? If that does this make sense? All right. Yeah, thanks for asking these questions and actively participating today. Not directly, but yeah, not even passively, but in a much lesser magnitude. So you won't say loss of elephants results in climate change, right? Because that's like a very abstract thing. But if you say loss of habitat leading to climate change, it can link a little better, right? Because then you can link it to carbon sinks, you can link it to biomass, you can link it to oxygen generation, etc., etc. All right. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Thanks for joining in. It's good to hear questions and people thinking. So yeah, it's nice to engage in these discussions. All right. Let's meet next week and catch you for the last 2 weeks. So next week we'll have the last session and then we'll have a revision at some point of time. Bye everyone.